That's me. That's my echo.
Okay.
Okay, that's
All
better.
right,
I'm gonna jump
everybody.
off.
Okay, Chappelle, I'm jumping off.
Okay. Medi?
You're in, Chappelle. You're on, Santita.
Okay. Do I need to redo this? Okay. Just reconnected, just to be safe.
Okay.
Maria,
Yes.
in the house, you doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Hold on, Paul. Can you hear them? Are you on Facebook, Paul?
No, but give me one moment.
Thank you.
A lot, and he started losing some hair. My vet, she says, "Oh, he must be allergic to the chicken." Another vet said it's the grain. Third vet, she said it's the weather, something in the air. And then somebody said, DINOVITE.com. I have been listening to these Dynamite ads, hearing about different stories of different people, and it just clicked.
Wow.
I got my first
Okay.
90-day supply, and it took a grand total of 2 weeks. And the dog stopped itching, the hair stopped falling out.
Dynamite is nutrition.
And Maxwell loved it. Now he's supposed to.
Have you seen all the gates around the Capitol?
Hey, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good
All
morning.
right. So I think I can hear everybody. Okay, and Paul, can you hear us?
I haven't heard them speak on Facebook yet, but
Okay.
everything sounds fine here.
Well, no, we need to make sure that you can hear them. That's how we'll know, right?
Yeah, I can hear them. They sound fine.
Okay, on Facebook.
Yes.
Okay, the sound is good. Thank you, Keith. Remember, do sound checks. Okay. Let me say hello to everybody. Deborah, Thomas, Raphael. Hey, Carol. Good morning. On the left coast. Good morning, Keith Fluid. Daryl. Mark, hey, thank you. Lorraine, hey. Literally. Will Jones. Deborah. Okay, Vanderlei down there in Brazil. Praying for all of you. You all are having quite a time with COVID-19, right? Quite a time. Quite a time.
Support more victories for veterans. Go to
so many people.
Listen to the Tom Hartman radio program every weekday for
so many people.
Right,
you know,
right
Robin Crawford, how you doing?
Where facts
and Brian, how you doing? So we're going to have Malcolm Nance with us at the bottom of the hour to talk about
federal agents
this
are working
breach
fast
of
to try to
security at the Hill. We're watching the hearings on television, but we're also this is March 4th.
The AP's Jackie Quinn's
people
got
who
the answer.
subscribe
House
to
Majority
the thoughts of
Leader
the
Steny Hoyer told
QAnon
lawmakers
group
they're changing their
feel that
schedule and
President
ending
Trump
up their
is actually going to be
week's
sworn
work
in
now.
today.
An insider says it's because of threats by a
Don't think that's going to happen,
Allegedly
but
planning
March
to storm
4th
the
is
Capitol
key
March
because
4th,
up
which
until we
used
had
to
the
be
20th
nation's
Amendment, that was the actual
inauguration
date that
Supporters
you were
of
sworn in.
QAnon are saying they believe
You know,
Thursday
all the
former
presidents
President
were
Trump
sworn
will
in.
rise to power again. And after
March
the deadly
4th.
January attack
So
on the Capitol,
it's
the House
it's kind of
decided
interesting
not
that
to
they
be
would
in
go there,
session
but it's
for the
something
day.
there's
Jackie Quinn, Washington.
I try
But
to
the House
listen
did
to
pass
and
two
study what
major
people
bills overnight.
different
The George
thoughts
Floyd
because
Justice and Police
there is a
Act
whole
will
their
ban
belief system is
chokeholds
built
and
on
immunity
a whole belief
protections
system,
for
and I
police
think we need to
officers.
pay attention.
Democratic Congresswoman Sheila
Even if you don't
Jackson-Lee.
agree with it, at least you need to understand people's thought processes. Not understanding people's thoughts leaves you in the dark. They're studying you, trust me. So we go with that. Do we have Pastor Brooks up, Paul?
I'm dialing him right now.
Thank you very much.
Tiffany of
Okay, I'm
Wisconsin
gonna
fires
let
back.
Chaparral. Well, Chaparral, are you still there? Okay, she's just looking. Maria, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm gonna let you go now because we're gonna be up in like 4.5 minutes.
All right,
Will
have a good
Alabama
show.
be the
Thank you,
next
sweetie.
state to
Thank you
dump
for
the mask
thank you for checking
mandate?
in.
This morning,
we
Alabama
can get
Governor
our
sound
Steve
together.
will
All
announce
right.
whether she'll lift the mask order.
Okay, everybody.
Health
So we're gonna have.
experts
So I
urging
want to
her
know
to
what you're
keep the
thinking
mask on.
about
But some Alabama Republicans wanted to dump it.
watching the
as
Capitol
Texas and
surrounded by
Mississippi
all
have
of
done.
these fences.
COVID-19
You
has
can't
now
even
killed more
approach
than
the Capitol, which is
518,000 people
like
in this country. This is AP News.
unbelievable. I mean, DC has just basically been locked
Authorities are
down. There was
taking
a
a
time when you
closer
used to be
look
able
at
to
the
drive in
crash that
front
landed
of
Tiger Woods in the
the White
hospital with
House. They shut
serious
that
leg
down.
injuries.
And
AP
so you
correspondent
can
Oscar
walk,
Wells
but you better
Gabriel.
walk quickly. Just, it's a lot. We're watching America become, really get locked down. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? And if America's getting locked down, so are Americans. So be very clear. Now they're about to have vaccine passports. If you've not been vaccinated or if you have not been tested, I guess within a particular period of time, negative for COVID-19, you won't be allowed in places. You won't be allowed to travel.
But there is no immediate
We've got there's a whole lot that people are marching and talking about right now. So think about that, everybody. Think about that. Think about it. So we're going to have Dwight McKee, Attorney Mark Fancher.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
Kevin Gray will be with us. And of course, we're going to have Dr. Deb on. And she will be she'll be answering some of your questions about COVID-19. She has a real, she's working on equity. And so we're going to talk with her about that, about many people are looking at
on the Bishop Ford Freeway inbound. Traffic is stop and go from 130th to 111th Street. There's a 3-car crash there. Traffic is also
mandating that these vaccines be distributed equitably.
Right now
and I'm just hoping that as we look at the vaccines, that we will also look at distributing health care, excellent health care, equitably. Got to do that too. So it's something we got a whole lot that's on the table, everybody. A whole lot that's on the table. So hey. Glad that you are with us today. And I want you all to call in at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Carmelita, how you doing? Cheryl Porter, is this my Cheryl? And Veronica, how you doing, sweetie? Louise, hey. And everybody, while you're here, please go over to the Santita Jackson Show page, channel on YouTube. I have to get my language right. Please like and subscribe there. Like and subscribe. We're streaming live over there now. So please like and subscribe over on the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube, that channel. Good day, Janae. Barbara Bacon from Oak Park in the house. Oh, yes, and we will have Dr. Deborah Holden on with us. She was traveling yesterday, and she and I missed each other in
1
the
minute.
wind. Okay. So do we have Pastor Brooks on with us?
Not yet, no.
Okay, you please let me know as soon as you get him, because
You got it.
I gotta get my rhythm together. Okay.
If you could just see the smiles that you get when lives have been changed, then it would make it all.
But if you don't have him by about 6:10, of course, get Dr. Deborah Holden out, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trying to stay safe, you want the best
So I can
protection
just move
possible.
on from one to the
When it
next.
comes to PPE, that means Lutema. Made in the USA with the highest quality materials, Lutema has mask sizes for all. Lutema masks pass ASTM Level 3 and NIOSH efficiency standards and come in a wide variety of colors and types, including M95i. Get your American-made face mask at Lutema.com. That's L-U-T-E-M-A.com.
How you doing, sweetie? I love you so much. Where are you? Are you in North Carolina still?
With promo code radio at Lutema.com.
People go south and they never come back up here.
All right, here we go. 5 seconds.
Where facts met. This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, March 4th, 2021. We're coming to you live from Chicago, from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820, and, of course, AM 950 Radio, the largest progressive talk radio station to the north in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Sending love to everybody. Please meet my morning stars over here, the Santita Jackson Morning Stars, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're also streaming on Reverend Jesse Jackson's page, yes, and the Santita Jackson landing page. And I need your help. I need you to go on over to YouTube and subscribe and like and subscribe the Santita Jackson Show page. So would you please do that for me? Please do that, even if you come back to Facebook. But we're trying to, I was told by the people at Facebook that we need to move things over to YouTube. So if you can help me, though I can't do it without you. There you go. March 4th. We've got a lot to talk about today, everybody. Got a lot to talk about. We are going to be talking about these hearings. We're seeing that January 6th really was big. And there were a lot of people involved in it. And we're going to start things off at the bottom of the hour with Malcolm Nance. So because of his extensive military experience, and he can tell us about what we're seeing, because the Pentagon would not help. The FBI, all of these agencies would not help these police officers, the U.S. Capitol Police. What was up with that? Everybody like and share, like and share, like and share. Hey, Kenneth, and hey, Lolita. And so you let me know, the Caribbean Queen, how you doing, girl? Let me know what you think about all of that, because March 4th is QAnon. They have targeted this as a big date because up until the 20th Amendment, this was the date that American presidents were sworn into office. So there's a lot going on here, everybody. You know what? Let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 36 degrees, above zero, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's going to be warmer up there than it is in Chicago. 46 degrees, above zero, mostly cloudy. The Dow closed down 121 points yesterday. The NASDAQ, wow, down 361 points. The S&P 500 down 50 points. But you know, these things, they go up and down, they come and go. High alert as the new QAnon date approaches on today. Authorities will be on high alert today as some segments of the QAnon community have been claiming that former President Trump will return to the White House today. He will be sworn in. What do you think about that? In the meantime, police have uncovered a possible plot by militia, many of whom are military and police officers. That story is beginning to come out too. Capitol Police say they have uncovered intelligence of a possible plot by a militia group to breach the U.S. Capitol on Thursday, nearly 2 months after this mob of supporters, as AP reports, of then President Donald Trump stormed the iconic building, the U.S. Capitol, to try and stop Congress from certifying the presidential election of now President Joe Biden. So, what do you think about that, everybody? Do you think that's going to happen today? Do you think what we saw on January 6th will be repeated, or will we see it happen in another way? In the meantime, these threats are so credible that House Democrats had initially intended a Thursday vote, a vote today on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2021. They altered the schedule Wednesday, prompting fears from lawmakers that their physical safety was at risk from conservative militia groups threatening violence at the Capitol on Thursday. So they've canceled the votes today. They've canceled the votes today. What do you think about that? I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. They're warning of a threat. They've canceled the votes. And now the Capitol itself is surrounded by a fence. You cannot get close to the Capitol. You can't get close. So what do you think about that? As we see, Capitol Police say intelligence shows that these militia groups, as they're plotting and planning, that many of them are police officers. Many of them are military. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? Remember when these top military leaders, the U.S. military's Joint Chiefs of Staff, issued a rare joint message addressing troops, saying that the violent riots at the Capitol, remember that they were an assault on the American constitutional process, and that they needed to be obedient to the constitutional process. There's a lot going on, everybody, a whole lot. So we're going to see. In the meantime, we saw that the Major General William Walker, who is the head of the D.C. National Guard, he's the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard, he says, in his words, unusual restrictions slowed the deployment of backup. He said his hands were tied by the Pentagon for more than 3 hours after he received a call from the Capitol Police chief saying a request for backup was imminent. Wow. He described how he had troops ready and waiting to be sent to the Capitol, but did not have a sign off from the Pentagon. It took more than 3 hours. He said these restrictions were unusual. He'd never seen anything like it before in all of his years. This is the commanding general of the D.C. National Guard, everybody. Wow. What do you think about that? Call me 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want to know what you're thinking about all of this. In the meantime, the National Guard, upon whom we are calling to protect us, they have been hospitalized, many of them, after eating substandard food. It's not just substandard food, everybody. The food has been raw. The bread has been moldy. Don't you think they deserve better? They have seen metal shavings and feathers found in their meals. It's been absolutely filthy, everybody. Wow. The National Guard. And they have been hospitalized because they've been sick because they've gotten bad food, bad food. We can do better than that. President Biden has agreed to narrow the eligibility for a new round of $1,400 stimulus payments. Now, if you are single, you've got to make less than $75,000 a year. If you're a married couple, you have to make $150,000 a year or less. And the numbers it just keeps getting, they keep making the pie smaller. Fewer and fewer people will have access to this money. So what do you think about that, everybody? In the meantime, the House has passed a sweeping voting rights and ethics bill. That's right. The For the People Act was passed yesterday, 220 to 210, largely along partisan lines. And so that's good news. That is good news. And we'll see, though. They're saying that it will have a hard time getting through the Senate. In the meantime, we're seeing that COVID deaths are high in countries with more overweight people, says this report from the World Obesity Federation. Countries such as the UK, US, and Italy, where more than 50% of adults are overweight, have the biggest proportions of deaths linked to the coronavirus. In the meantime, New York is testing a COVID passport. With limited resumption of sporting events at venues in New York, Madison Square Garden, and the Barclays Center out in Brooklyn, they will be used as the testing ground for a new digital pass that could confirm the owner's COVID status. It will confirm either you have been vaccinated or you've been recently tested negative for the coronavirus. In the meantime, 1 in 7 U.S. prisoners is serving life, and 2/3 of those people are of color. Homicides have risen by 30% in 2020, and carjackings have risen as well. Boy, what do you think about all of this? There's a lot going on, everybody. Let us go to Dr. Deborah Fur Holden. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, how you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Santita. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, and honey, and the good news is we're going to get Pastor Darius Brooks at some point. But the good news is that we are all here, everybody. This is a day that God has made, and rejoice and be glad in it, and pay attention to everything. We're living through a time of tremendous change, and it's a good thing to see things that we never thought we would see, and to be a part of change that we never thought we could see happen in our lifetimes. But I tell you what, you have to be part of the change. The change that you seek, you have to be it. If you see it, you can be it. Now we have to make this new world what it's supposed to be. So get up and get at it, everybody. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, I'm seeing a whole lot on the horizon on COVID-19. COVID-19 passports. We're seeing that. We're seeing the real impact of obesity on COVID-19, and but we're also seeing the impact of, as we have seen, something that is near and dear to your heart. Really getting equitable health care. Equitable, not just equal health care, like equal numbers. You're saying, no, we need to treat the poor with as much care as we do the wealthy. So talk to me about this new, this equity mandate that you're working on.
It's very exciting. It's super exciting. So we have a open letter that we've drafted for President Biden, and the first component of that. And I kept thinking, how do we actually get to equity? Okay, let me just take a step back. How do we get to equity? And so I always tell people it's equivalent to you've got 3 kids of 3 different ages and 3 different sizes, and you give them all the same amount of food every night for dinner, right? That wouldn't be equitable, because a 16-year-old boy would need a different portion of food than a 4-year-old girl, right? Your equity is about fairness. Equity is about providing people with what they needed. And in an ideal world, the approach that I prefer for us to get to equity is to remove all of the barriers, unnecessary, built-in, man-made, societal, all of the barriers that people have to having access to what they need to be healthy and to have fair play, right? So I started off, the movement was about health equity. And then we realized without racial equity, we'll never have health equity, because that's really a lot of what's underneath of it all. And so mandate equity is a movement for using whatever legislative, power or other authority people have to set things straight. So what I always say is, where there is goodwill, there is a legislative way. If it matters, it should be law. Everything in our society that we said really matters is a law. And we've talked a lot about different things around education and saying that access to high quality education is actually not law, right? We have some laws around education, but not really the ones that you would think. And so if you really think about it, the areas where we've made any progress or made any real difference, it's because we had laws behind it. And not only do we have laws, those laws are written, they're enforceable, and they are enforced. And oftentimes those laws are attached to resources. And there's some consequence. So if you break the law, there's a consequence. And similarly, if you honor the law, there's some benefit, right? And even if the benefit is avoiding punishment, and oftentimes when we're talking about at the level of states, those laws are attached to resources. So when I look at this issue around COVID and COVID equity, we've seen tremendous inequity during COVID. Earlier in the pandemic, what we saw is that African American and minority communities got hit really hard. And I've heard the argument, and people say, well, I don't think that this virus sees race. The virus doesn't see race. And that is true. The virus has only got one mission, and that's to find a host and stay alive. Live to fight another day. So the virus is simply looking for somebody to get inside of their body so it can reproduce itself and it can stay alive. And it cannot do that in the absence of a host. So while the virus might not see your race, our society does. And so what we found is that underrepresented minorities were much more likely to have to be out in the workplace. Why? Because overrepresented in the type of jobs where you couldn't just switch it to Zoom, where you couldn't just shelter in place and afford to keep the lights on. And that was very much so true in the African American community, and it was also true in the Hispanic community. We found that a lot of even Native Americans had excess exposure risk, likelihood of coming in contact with the virus, because for a variety of reasons, they were more likely to have to move around earlier in the pandemic, when a lot of people, even though we were going stir crazy, we now find out it's a privilege to be able to do your job at home. It's a privilege to have the kind of job where you can just, turn your computer on, and in many cases, a computer that your employer gave you and do your job and collect your regular paycheck while being at home. And so we leveled the playing field, and we said we got to make sure that everybody has what they need to be able to shelter in place. And we did things at the federal level, like enhanced unemployment, because we realized typical unemployment wasn't enough for most people to be able to keep the lights on. If we just gave people regular unemployment, they would still be forced to get out into the marketplace and try to earn money so that they could keep the lights on and keep food on the table.
Well, then wait a minute. Let me ask you this. What needs to be mandated? Are we just looking at COVID-19, or are you looking at our healthfulness overall? Because COVID-19, this pandemic, has exposed the fact that number one, we don't have a national health plan, right? So that's a problem. It's sad that we have to have the military distribute the vaccines. It's because we don't have a national health plan. The military, and they do it efficiently. Of course they do. Why do they do it efficiently? Because they get all the money. So what are you looking for? I mean, what needs to be mandated? How would this look?
For me, a mandate for equity is legislative action to ensure fairness. So what a mandate for equity in COVID would look like, and I had to really give this some thought, Santita, because I thought remember that little Schoolhouse Rock video about how a bill becomes a law?
Oh, absolutely.
A little bill sitting on the steps of Capitol Hill. And so I thought there are certain powers that the president holds. And this is a little funny, and I have to admit it. we saw with the last president what happens when people don't understand what the president can and can't do. You remember our former president used to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And we thought, who told you can do that? That's not how the Constitution works. You don't actually even have those powers, right? And so what is in the hands and what is in what power does our actual president have? Because see, we see bipartisan and partisan politics play out, and we can't get this side of the aisle to work with this side of the aisle, even if they're talking about working on something that makes good sense and that's really for the people. And even that might seem obvious. So specifically what we're calling for, and don't get me wrong, mandate equity could apply to almost every major challenge that we face in our country related to health and wealth and equality.
Okay. Right?
Oftentimes there is some legislative way to level the playing field. The problem is it's often not thoughtful. So specifically, the open letter that's available now is to President Joe Biden. It is to ask President Biden to declare COVID vaccine equity a national emergency. And it's almost a year to the day. Do you know it was on March 13th that President Trump declared the COVID-19 pandemic a national emergency? And let me tell you why that's so important. He didn't have the power all by himself to say, we've got this emergency and we've got to solve this problem, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put this much money on the table. I'm going to provide these supports for people. I'm going to enhance unemployment. I'm going to create payroll protection loans for small businesses. He couldn't do all of that. What he could do was declare a national emergency, and then Congress was able to legislate the rest. But we had to start somewhere. And this issue around COVID vaccine equity and just equity in general, and I'm specifically talking about COVID because that's what we're dealing with live and in living color right now. But we know we've got multiple epidemics running all at the same time. We've just never given real priority to many of them. Racism is a public health crisis of epidemic proportion that's happening at the same time as COVID-19. But we're only focused on and treating the one epidemic. But when you put two epidemics together, you have the potential to get what's called a syndemic. And a syndemic is when you've got two epidemics working at the same time, and the impact of one plus the other is greater than the sum of their individual parts. So adding racism to COVID-19, we didn't see double the rate. We saw triple, quadruple the rate of COVID cases and deaths in some communities. In my own state, African Americans were 3 times overrepresented, 14% of the population, but 41% of deaths. 14% of the population, but 41% of cases and nearly 33% of the deaths earlier in the pandemic.
Well, now,
and so we need that.
Well, because
we need the president to declare an emergency. Okay. We need him to declare equity a national emergency. And you know what? We declared COVID a national emergency because we had something that was spreading. We had something that was ravaging through our society. We had something that was making people sick and making some people die. And guess what? Racism is the exact same thing and operates the very same way. It is ravaged through our society. It spreads person to person, and it spreads system to system and institution to institution. And believe me when I say it has some people live sicker and die younger.
Well, I've got a couple of minutes. I literally have, 90 seconds before we go. What do you want us to look at? With this, as you look to mandate equity, that literally mean that we get masks, that you will have access to vaccines and therapeutics. 90 seconds.
It means everybody will have fair access to the same resources being used to combat this epidemic. It will be written, it will be enforceable, and it will be attached to resources. That's what a mandate is. It should be written, enforceable, attached to resources, and everybody should have fair access to what they need. Yeah. It's not equality. I'm not asking to mandate equality. I'm talking about equity.
And when you don't obey the law,
1 minute.
you pay the price. Dr. Deborah Furholden, pushing for equity. You gave us the example. Got 3 kids, different ages. They all don't get the same portion of food. Because a newborn needs something very different than a 16-year-old. Okay? Dr. Deborah Furholden, we're sending you much love. Stay right here so you can answer some questions on Facebook. But we're going to have Malcolm Nance to talk to us about what's happening in Washington today. Storming the Bastille. Will that happen again? Will we see these militias, will we see these persons storm the Capitol? They can't get near it. But who actually did the storming? I mean, so much is beginning to come
15.
out. Well, at least a little bit is. It certainly does get your wheels turning. I'm Santita Jackson.
10.
This is the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT at AM 950 Radio.
5.
Up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. 773-763-WCPT. Call me. Back in just a minute. Dr. Deb, it's great hearing your voice.
I know, and I'm sad I missed y'all yesterday. I was flying, but I know y'all had to talk about what's about to happen in Texas. Oh, Lordy.
Oh, we did. We missed you, but we were able to talk about, well, it's just, you have a potential super spreader event, but people, oh boy, that's why I think we have to open up the conversation about COVID-19 and how people are feeling all the way around, what they're believing, what they're feeling. And we need to open it up to all kinds of, unless we talk to everybody, Deborah, we're not going to get through this because there's a reservoir of mistrust all the way around. And that is a problem. You have physicians who have questions about the vaccine, about therapeutics. They're not able to get a decent hearing. You have people who sustained vaccine injuries. They're getting pushed off of social media. That's not right. I mean, and then you have other people who are doing quite well. But you also, at the end of the day, people don't have vitamins. So even when you get this vaccine, your health is still not what it ought to be. This is, so please consider as you fight for equity, people, have access to good food. Remember last year, this time, you had farmers who were destroying their crops because the food distribution chain was disrupted. It's like, wait. You mean to tell me, and these are small farmers who were being put out of business. And that's not right. People need good, decent food. That was something that First Lady Michelle Obama was really fighting for. When she did a wonderful thing by telling you about, planting a garden, getting some seeds, even saving. My mother makes me save the seeds for my watermelon and apples. I save seeds and I dehydrate them. She said, look, God has given you the opportunity and the wherewithal to always eat. Everything that God makes has buried in it its own rebirth. Think about that. If it doesn't have a seed, I don't know where it comes from. So there we have it. But we've got Malcolm Nance is going to be up with us. Dwight McKee is going to be with us a little bit later. But I am very, very excited to have Malcolm Nance. And Malcolm Nance, how are you?
I'm very well, and I love what you're saying about gardening. I have a massive garden.
Oh, do you really? Okay, what do you grow?
Well, we actually have 2 separate gardens. My daughter and I maintain a vegetable garden that my late wife planted, and so we're always rebirthing what she did. So we have
back in 1 minute.
You know what we're really good at?
What?
We're really good at broccoli and I'm having a senior moment here.
Tomatoes or cucumbers?
We have all sorts of stuff. Well, we grow cucumbers, we grow tomatoes, we grow broccoli, we grow cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Oh my God, Brussels sprouts grow all the way to
30
February in huge stalks. So we're constantly filled with Brussels sprouts. But you know, you're right. God gave you the capacity to have your own supermarket.
Absolutely. God is so good.
Mm-hmm.
God is so
15.
good. God is so good. God doesn't leave you hanging. God does not leave you hanging. No,
10.
no. Oh, this is so wonderful. I have to tell Mom because I actually
5.
started growing some herbs so I can have my own time.
Oh, we have
and
one
things
of those.
like
We have little herb gardens.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, we have one of our favorite people with us today to talk about, oh, wow. This is March 4th, 2021, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the largest progressive talk radio station to the north. We're talking about, and I want you to call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. This gentleman is one of the most brilliant and insightful, and really, dare I say, prophetic. He sees things and he calls them and he tells us these things are going to happen. Of course, he's an author, he's a commentator, one of our esteemed intelligence veterans in the military, and we're just so excited to have this naval vet with us. And I have a special place in my heart for Navy men. My mother's stepfather was a naval man. God rest his soul, and he's buried in Arlington along with my grandmother. So that touches me greatly. And you know, your book, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, that was hard to read, I have to tell you, because I feel like I'm in the midst of that right now. And we're looking at people who are saying, Malcolm Nance, that they've shut down the Capitol. I mean, it's completely fenced in. Stunning. And they've canceled the session of Congress today because they're afraid that something's going to happen, something awful. Help me. What are we looking at? I mean, let's step back and let's look at these hearings, Malcolm Nance. I mean, we saw the head of the D.C. National Guard who said this was very unusual. I couldn't get any help from the Pentagon. I had my people ready, but I couldn't use them. What was going on with the Pentagon, with the FBI, with Homeland Security? You got to help me. Help us to understand what we're looking at.
Well, we discussed this, I guess, about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago. We talked right after the incident on the Capitol. I'm loath to dwell in conspiracy theory that Donald Trump ordered the Pentagon not to do anything. I don't think that's what's happened. What I think happened is something that all of us, and certainly your listeners, can understand. When the Black Lives Matter protest happened last year, with their, which did have an edge of violence, which generally weren't black people. It was a group of anarchists called Black Bloc who would dress in black and would come and smash windows and stuff. But for the most part, overwhelmingly peaceful protests. They were met with a wall of steel. National Guard, Federal Bureau of Prisons, FBI, Customs and Border Patrol, SWAT teams, everything was thrown at them in every city that came up. However, when Trump held this rally, which had 40,000 to 50,000 people on the mall, I'm certain that the national security apparatus, including the security people at the White House, people inside the government, the Park Service, the Capitol Hill Police, and especially the Pentagon, all did this. They assumed, because the protesters were white and Trump supporters, that nothing would happen, because they had the camouflage of their skin to approach their enemies and strike out. And even after they struck out, most of the people on the conservative side of government still don't think that this is a problem. And that is where the ultimate privilege in America is that you could actually come out here, use your ethnicity to attack that fundamentals, the foundations of American democracy, and still have 50% of the people in this country, or a little less, actually, mid-40s, assume that what you did was right and good. So what I really think happened was that the national security apparatus just disarmed itself. And said, these people are nice people. They're the people we see at Walmart and at the mall, and they're not going to do anything. And that's why when the chief of the D.C. National Guard, whose sole function in life is to prepare for trouble and national disasters, who, is an African-American general of 19 years service, when he saw trouble coming, they ignored it. And they put further hobbles on him. They made so that he couldn't even bring the resources into his system. They made it so that when he wanted to call for the National Guard against these white Trump supporters, he had to have the personal permission of a junior colonel that was retired, pulled up out of nowhere at the National Counterintelligence Center, National Counterterrorism Center, and made the Secretary of Defense over every eligible and qualified person and multi-star general in America, because that person was guaranteed to do Trump's bidding. And he did. He said, you cannot ask for resources without my personal permission. And what did he do? The Secretary of Defense was watching the same fighting we all were, and he chose not to give permission for the National Guard for 3 hours. And I'm suspicious that that is the key individual who let this play out deliberately.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this could break down so terribly. I mean, there was no sense of obligation. They were watching what was happening on Capitol Hill. They saw what was happening at the Capitol, and nobody did anything. I mean, and I'm trying to figure out how deep inside this goes, right? Because
that's why I'm saying,
I mean, help me.
The Secretary of Defense may be the key guy.
Wow.
Acting Secretary of Defense may be the key guy. Look, within the White House, you have to understand, Donald Trump also watched on television with glee at what was happening on the Capitol. He was happy about what was going on at the Capitol. So he's the primary person. He incited this mob. He set them to march towards the Capitol. There were people there who were pre-positioned for for hours before that. And they had been planning for at least a month to take positions around the Capitol and take the building. You could buy T-shirts on Etsy about Storm the Hill and Stop the Steal. So this was no great secret to anyone who had their eyes open. The breakdown occurred starting with the president having his supporters and ordering them to go up there. And from that point, the entire apparatus assumed, again, the ethnicity of the protesters and their ideological makeup was protection enough. It was a guarantee that they wouldn't do anything, which to those of us in national security and intelligence know is insane, because I'm from Philadelphia. And being from Philadelphia, I have seen what happens in downtown Philadelphia when the Eagles or the Phillies win a national championship. They tear the city apart. So why would you assume that these people, because they were Trump supporters, on the day that they were calling to stop American electoral democracy from happening, were just going to walk up there and be nice? Because there is a natural assumption that if you are white in America, you are protected. And even when you do violence, we find out right now, you're still protected.
I'm trying to find out, when I read that one of the leaders of the Oath Keepers still had active top secret security clearance and is a former naval commander. How does that work? I mean, you have people who
first off,
help me with that.
Well, you have to understand, the Oath Keepers are a bunch of idiots. They tried to recruit me years ago, And this is a weird organization because their stated goal, which started, by the way, under Obama, of course, President Obama, was that they wanted people to swear their oaths that members of the armed forces and police would never use their service against the people of the United States, right? In the United States. Interestingly enough, Stuart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers, was one of the first people to call for the army to be used to take over the government and to be used against the people of the United States. See how that works? Mm-hmm. So this guy, this commander, who was part of a conspiracy, he's a former Navy lieutenant commander, went on to become an FBI section chief, was one of the ones who was plotting to bring heavy weapons into the city and to help take over the Capitol through armed force, if need be. He no longer has a clearance. Believe me, that went the day that he was arrested. But the fact is that many high-powered people, and we suspect that there were members of Congress involved in this conspiracy, and we know, if it's never the member itself, it is always going to be these right-wing staff because their staffers are hardcore. They have a few professionals in there who've been on Capitol Hill, but most of them are people that are bought up from the campaign. And we have video of one of them who was on top of the Capitol cheering on the attack. So that remains to be seen. But as I said, people of all walks of life. There were armed policemen in this protest. We've identified individuals through photo recognition with guns on their hips that came into the Capitol. And these people were willing to do battle. We're just lucky through the grace of God that it did not turn into a massive gun battle in that building.
What do you expect to happen today? Or will we not see anything?
I don't think anything's going to happen today, to be quite honest with you. I really don't think anything's going to happen today. A lot of I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post about 4 weeks ago, where I said the number one weapon that we have against these insurrectionists and people who support insurrectionists, which I'm sorry, it goes to the extended Republican Party and to all Trump voters. Because right now, amongst the Republican Party, if I'm not mistaken, the statistic is 68. Let me get that. I'll have to check on that. But a majority of Trump voters believe that the Capitol attack was carried out by Antifa and not by Trump supporters. Only 21% of them believe it was carried out by Trump supporters. That is a detachment from reality, Santita. They want you to believe them and not your lying eyes. There's been 250 arrests, and every one of them was a rabid Trump supporter. So today, they're putting out the story that anything that happens today is being carried out by liberals, and they're there to blame it on QAnon. I was there when QAnon posted this crazy theory, and here's what the crazy theory is about March 4th, that Donald Trump didn't become president on January 20th because that is the inauguration date of the Incorporated Corporation of the United States, and that the last true president was inaugurated on March 20th when the date changed back in the 1800s, and that would make Donald Trump the 19th true president of the United States when he steps into power today and becomes inaugurated. That's crazy. But guess what? They're all denying they ever said that today. And now what they're trying to say is that they never said that, and that Donald Trump has never lost power as president, and he is still the remaining 45th president of the United States. It is madness. And anybody that comes and tells any of your listeners this is crazy. And they need to break that cycle of craziness in their family, because it is insidious, and we now know it's proved deadly.
There's this Guardian report that says that the U.S. militia is growing. These groups are drawing from the military and the police. Why?
They are.
Why?
Look, you know what? The biggest problem here is not just the fact that militias are rising. It's that they have a common ideology. And this is, terrorist groups don't just spring up because three guys have guns and they go, it's fun to shoot guns, let's become terrorists, right? They spring up because there is an ideological grievance at stake. And what they do is they take their grievance so far that they feel that they want to carry out armed militancy in order to, to achieve a goal. And they're willing to do that by killing innocent civilians or targets in order to influence a broader audience, right? Blowing up buildings, shooting individuals. So the problem is that you have to identify the ideology. What is the ideology that drives them? Well, we know in some circumstances it starts with their insane love of the Second Amendment. Look, I'm a gun collector. I love guns. They're great. I do not sleep with them in my bed. I don't caress them and give them names. All right? I don't shoot them but annually. That's how they do it. They are obsessed with the inherent force of owning a gun and using it. Then they have now glommed on to Donald Trump as their tribal hero. And as their tribal hero, they're willing, like Game of Thrones, to take up arms to defend it. It's crazy. So that is why we have people that have stepped over from what is generally normal craziness to armed militancy. And that's how you get groups like ISIS, form of like-minded people who are going to create their own ideological paradise. Well, that's just not the way it is. And they're going to find out, and they have been finding out, that the nation rejects this, which is why I said in my op-ed, you have to shame these people. And they don't like it when you shame them. They don't like it one bit that people call them out on, on what they're doing. And that is the best tool that we have right now.
Let me go to Pam. I have some people who want to speak with you. Pam, what's on your... Oh, yeah. I mean, because I could talk to you all day because it's just... I know I don't understand this whole process. And no one is better at examining this. No one knows more than you do. And of course, I urge you to get the book, The Plot to Betray America. You've got to get it. But, all of his books are so informative. You've got to get them. Pam, what's on your mind today, my dear friend?
Good morning. Good morning, Santita. Good morning. And good morning to you, Malcolm Nance. I appreciate you.
Hey, Pam.
Hi. I read the transcript of General Walker, correct? William Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And Santita, he said they were 18 minutes away. He said he had men ready on the bus. And when they finally got approval, 18 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine, had he received the approval sooner, the carnage that could have been avoided? So, Mr. Nance, let me just tell you what I'm thinking. I don't know who to trust in the Pentagon. I want to know, why was Charlie Flynn on the call? I want Christopher Wray fired. I saw his arrogant testimony. And the FBI, the other young lady, I think from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, woefully inadequate. So I think whomever was in a Republican appointee that Trump put in office, they should be removed immediately, Santita. And I'll add this, as it relates to this racism, I want to know, what are the white leaders going to do? And the reason I preference that, Santita, when things occur in the Black community, the first thing or the first people they go to, well, what are the Black leaders going to do? What is Reverend Jackson going to do? What is Reverend Sharpton going to do? What are the white leaders, the white psychologists, the white ministers, pastors, clergy, Catholic people, all of them going to do to help eradicate racism? Because as a Black woman, I'm not trying to do anymore. I can't be nice enough, look pretty enough, or do whatever. I'm tired of it, Santita.
I'm with you.
And the white community has to own it and say, what are we going to do about it?
Go ask the
so
Cardinals.
I thank you for letting me have my say.
I'm with you. Go ask the College of Cardinals. go ask the archbishops. Go to them. Go to their preachers. I mean, really.
And I believe General Walker has a lot more he wants to say. I just wish the committee would ask the right question. And I'll hang up and listen.
Everything that comes up, everything that you can't say. But why don't you respond to her? Because I'm going to bring up Dwight McKee because he wanted to say something to you before you left. He's coming on the next segment. He said, no. I love Malcolm Nance. I got to hear. Well, you know what? Let me let me bring up.
Pam's right.
So what do you think about Pam? What she's saying? She said she
Pam's
is
right.
tired. Okay.
Pam, stay on the phone next time I call in. Let me tell you something. She's right. I worked in counterterrorism for well over 30 plus years. And the first thing that we hear every time a young Muslim American is arrested for material support to ISIS or expresses any interest or is caught on the internet, the first thing we say is, where were they radicalized? What mosque did they go to that helped them to radicalize this? How did their religion play a role in this? Why are there community leaders in the Muslim world not denouncing them? Where is, the Council for American Islamic Relations? Why are they not denouncing them? And these groups do denounce them, but the media doesn't cover it. So why can we not apply that double standard here? Why are these groups, where are the groups denouncing these insurgents? Why are Republican senators and congressmen not coming out and full-throatedly saying they don't support the material support to terrorist groups? They're dancing around it because these are their base voters. It would be almost as if, it's closer to Northern Ireland, where the Irish Republican Army terrorist group had a political body, Sinn Féin, right? Their political wing, which represented them in the Irish government. And they need to call these people out. And we saw that in the first few days after the insurrection. And then the insurrectionists and their family in the base started getting angry at them and told them they were going to put them out because they didn't have passionate Trump love. And then everything flipped on a dime. Now they don't support it, but they definitely don't denounce it.
Dwight McKee, I hear you back there. What say you?
Hey, Dwight.
First, let me say good morning. I basically agree with much of what Malcolm has said. The only thing that I would differ with him on is that I think we're focused on an event when we should be focused on the culture. Is that what happened in Washington really represented a major high profile, never seen this before event. But the fact of the matter is the culture is the basis of the country. The country is built on that mentality. And so we've had lynch mobs for the last 300 years. We've had the slave patrol the last 400 years. We've had manifest destiny for the last 400 years. We've taken the land from the natives for the last 100 years, and we've been infatuated with guns since we came here, not just because we have a gun fetish, but because we needed guns in order to actualize all the other intentions, which was the process of putting the flag down, taking somebody else's land and declaring yourself in charge, and using guns to sustain that. And so what we're looking at now, in my opinion, is not just this group of people who have taken over the Capitol, but we're looking at the culture which helped sustain them. I don't think the problem was the fact that we didn't assume that they were going to do something when we got there. That wasn't a mystery. The assumption is, or the issue is, why did we not do anything when we found out what they were about to do when they got there? And that comes from the inside out. They couldn't make their decision.
Well, I have a couple of minutes.
They could not do.
I literally, Dwight, have a couple of minutes before Mr. Nance has to go. And they belong to you.
Well, let me say this last thing.
Oh, no.
They could not decide to take down the National Guard.
Okay.
Their decision had to be made.
2 minutes.
Okay.
They belong to you, Malcolm.
Okay. Well, he's right in a sense. And guns have always been the vehicle for power and ruling in the Western Hemisphere through conquest, right? Let's not hash history. I know a lot of people like to think that the 1619 Project was all fiction, right, on the conservative side of the world. And one of my favorite quotes this year has been a comment about unpaid internships being unfair in America. And it was Michael Harriot, the editor for the Grio, who said, yeah, and we've been on unpaid internships since 1619. So, you know, but that unpaid internship was forced. As I like to say, African Americans are not immigrants to America. We are hostages. And that is how power has always been controlled. But it created inherent bias. Because when you could, you know, literally commit a minor genocide of the American Indian and move them from the East Coast to all these reservations out west at force of gun through war, you get away with that. What you're seeing now is the hangover from this and the Civil War, where people are now, you know, espousing neo-Confederate ideology. So it's not going to get any better until we can confront
30.
it. But it is all steeped in racism on a very large scale, and Donald Trump was their racist tribal chief. I'm sorry. I'm giving this as an intelligence assessment. If this was some country in Eastern
15.
Europe or Central Asia, I would say the exact same thing.
Malcolm Nance, the plot to betray America. You
5.
are a gift. Malcolm Nance, I cannot wait for you to come back. We're going to continue to watch these hearings so that we can find out what's going on, everybody. It's a deep kind of thing. More of this discussion on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a few minutes. Malcolm Nance, you are a jewel.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
It's fun. Your show, I can talk to the Black community directly, so I can get away with a lot more than I can on LSD.
I know. Look, I'm like, okay, Malcolm. He's just going with this particular flow. But, you know, but that's true because you do have to deal with different audiences differently, even though I do have a big white audience because that's my base audience. But it's interesting. They hear us because I think they believe we're really trying to be fair. And you remember there was a song that was out when we were kids, Get Your Lies Straight, baby. Because we've had a lot of lies that have been told. And this, you know, what did you say? The unpaid internship? Michael Harriot is a hoot. Yeah, we didn't work for free for several hundred years. We were not paid. The Staple Singers had a song, When Will We Be Paid for the Work We've Done? Malcolm, I heard that song in 1971. I was a little girl. We were in Africa. We were at the Soul to Soul Festival in Ghana. They were celebrating their independence. And I heard that song one time, and I've never forgotten it. Never, ever forgotten it. When will we? And the audience went crazy. They went crazy when they heard that. And when Mavis and Miss Cleo and Pop Staples, oh my goodness, and Miss Yvonne, when they sang that song, it made me cry. And I think I was like 6. you know,
I would like you to say to your audience, of all the communities that should be upset about the attack on the Capitol, it's ours. We built that building with our bare hands. Our blood, our sweat, and our tears created that building and the White House. So you attack it, now we could also categorize that as an act of hate against Blacks.
Well, you know, can you stay a couple of minutes and say that at the top and just open up my next hour with that and then go?
Sure. All right. I can do that. And I have to run because I have to go do my regular radio today.
I know you got a whole lot of stuff to do, but you know, there was a gentleman, I forget his name. He used to do a Black tour of Washington, D.C., Malcolm and Dwight. Oh, yeah. I mean, he'd written a book about it. I'm going to find it. And when I find it, I'm going to send one to you because
I'd like to do.
You should do. I'm telling you, it's great. I mean, he even said, you know, all of the founding fathers were into astrology, numerology, and all of these things. And all
Masonry.
I mean, and all of our monuments in Washington were built to be. They're in direct alignment with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Even 16th Street is. Thank you, Benjamin Banneker. is on the Meridian line. I mean, there's just so much.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, and he went through all of that and down to the fact that the White House and the Capitol built by black hands, and then if you go around the base of the Capitol, you see engraved into the Capitol, or say chiseled in, you have an African face, a European face. You have different races
Right.
at the base.
So
yeah.
Philadelphia did that. In Philadelphia City Hall, there are 4 key columns in each quadrant of the building. And in the northeastern quadrant that holds up the main building, they have column heads of every race.
Wow.
So there's a black race column head with 6 black figures, men and women, Indian, white, and Asians. And it's beautiful.
Wow. But it's
I was born there. I only found that out in the last few years.
But but these are the things that we need to tell, because it was, I think, what was it? Was it Memorial Day? Oh goodness! One of these holidays. Well, all our major holidays are connected to slavery in some way. And I told this young black man who was an Uber driver, I said, "Did you know that this holiday was born from our ancestors?" And I saw him physically change. The pride that he had in himself, it almost made me cry. And I'm trying to remember which holiday it was, but it was so touching to see him. He saw himself in this country. And
well, I'll tell you what.
Yes.
And that's what we want. I mean, we're so oppressed. We want to see ourselves in the faces of the heroes of this country. And I'm doing my little bit next year. I have my memoirs coming out.
Oh, really? I'm claiming. I'm
And
getting an interview. I know that. Hello.
All right. Yeah, that'll be fine. Thinker, Sailor, Black Man, Spy. that's
How did you come
title.
up with that title?
I was just sitting around one day and I was goofing. And so somebody said, describe yourself in like 2 sentences. And I said, thinker, sailor, black man, spy, patriot, father, widower, I.
Wow.
And that's the full title of the book. So, because it sums up everything. But then again, I made up this hashtag for a Spy Museum event, hashtag Black Spies Matter. And it was me and 2 CIA officers. We were all having a ball with that. We were like, that's right, Black Spies Matter. But you wouldn't know it because nobody.
1 minute.
I had a publisher, Santita. Both books got, I got a 7-figure deal on this. But I had a publisher, I'm not joking, in December tell me nobody would want to read that biography.
What?
I was like, I said, I'm writing it and I want to read it. You're going to tell me of all these spy books that sell like crazy left and right, you're going to tell me no one would want to read about the only book written about a black spy in the modern era?
30.
Really? And that's what she said. She said, yeah, nobody's interested in that. I was like, we're not going with you.
That's right. Her limited thinking. That's
Mm-hmm.
people in the power. You cannot give away the power of your self-assessment.
15.
Okay, we're coming up, but I'm going to have you come in, and
All
I
right.
want you to give us that point, because
10.
you've got other obligations today.
Okay.
But I thank you
5.
for always availing yourself to us when you have time, and you make the time for the show. And thank you. You just do, and I appreciate it.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Thursday, March 4th, 2021. We're talking about the hearings at the Capitol, about what happened on January 6th. So I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. What did you make of the head of the D.C. National Guard saying, well, I couldn't get there for hours because the Pentagon held me up? What happened, everybody? We've been talking with Malcolm Nance about that. And as I go to before, he is my headline today. Chicago going to have a high of 36 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 46 degrees. Wow, above zero, mostly sunny. The Dow was down 121 points yesterday. The NASDAQ down 361 points. The S&P 500 down 50 points. High alert today as this... well, up until the 20th Amendment, Our presidents were sworn in on March 4th, and people are expecting on the Hill today. The police have uncovered a possible plot by militia to breach the Capitol. And so, before Malcolm Nance leaves us to meet his other obligations today, he said, we need to really take ownership. We need to take some ownership here of the Capitol, of the White House, really of this nation. You made a point that I said, I asked you to stay over and say your piece.
Okay. There's one thing that I think that the African American community in particular should be upset about with regards to the January 6th attack. And it's a few things that very few people ever discuss, and that many in our own community have no idea of. And that is this fact. The United States Capitol building and the White House were both built by African American slaves. We built that building. We, as a community, should be more offended that somebody would come up and lay siege to it. That had never been done. That the Confederate flag, the flag of slavery, was brought into that building, and that the building that our ancestors built with their literal blood, sweat, tears, and lives was desecrated by a bunch of neo-Confederate idiots. Here's another thing that I think that people don't know. What I really get upset about with these insurrectionists is they don't understand what America is and what America has developed into in fits and starts over all this time. And that's this. There are 12 letters on the top of the Capitol. When you go to the pinnacle, there are 12 letters. And above those letters is a statue of a woman known as the goddess of Columbia, the goddess of peace, right? That statue was designed by an African American woman and was placed up there. It's a woman holding the dove and signifying the official seal of America, the Statue of Peace. And below it, those 12 letters are E pluribus unum, the Latin for from many, one. So this idea of diversity in America as an inclusive nation is not new. Look, our crazy Enlightenment era founding fathers who, were a bunch of flaming hypocrites because they were talking about peace, love, happiness, and equality while having sex with their slaves. I'm looking at you, Thomas Jefferson. They were really trying to push us to this ideal of where we are today. And they knew it wasn't going to happen in their time, so they could be hypocrites about it. But now we have people in this country who no longer believe in from many one. They believe in a new Latin motto, unum tribus dominate. One tribe will dominate the others. And that's what we have to resist. That's our building. We constructed that building and the White House with our bare hands. We should be the first people out in public defending it. That's all I got to say.
Mic drop on that. Malcolm Nance, Philly's own.
Can I say before you go? I didn't know today whether I was talking to Malcolm Nance or Malcolm X.
It's a thin line. It's a thin line. Well, I know that, I can't wait for you to release your memoir and talk about what you've seen, because you're in a very, very interesting position as someone who's been in intelligence, as an African American, and your family has served in every war. I think you said since the Civil War.
Yeah,
and we are, and it's when you get to Africa, you see how connected we are to the homeland, to the motherland. But they will tell you, no, you are something different. I mean, America and Americans, we are our own thing. I mean, we're not bound by tribe. We're bound by an idea and ideals, whether we like it or not. Reverend Jackson has often said we came over here in different ships, or on different ships, in different positions on those ships, but we're in the same boat now. We are. And I want to thank you for all that you do, and I thank you for making the time to be on this show and Malcolm Nance, excuse me.
All right. All right, y'all. Take care.
I love you so much. Hey, everybody. The police have uncovered a possible plot by militia to breach the Capitol. Will that happen today? What is all of this about? We saw the head of the D.C. National Guard say that I've never seen anything like this before. We could not get any help. It was unusual, as he said. Major General William Walker said his hands were tied by the Pentagon for more than 3 hours after he received a call from the Capitol Police Chief, whose voice, as he said, cracked with emotion, saying a request for backup was imminent, delaying the arrival of military forces at the premises as lawmakers evacuated or barricaded themselves in offices during one of the biggest national security failures since the 9/11 attacks. And it was on our soil. And the perpetrators were people who are Americans, and many of them are military and police. And so, Dwight, very quickly, why don't you set the table for us? Because I want to hear from Mark Fancher, of course, and Attorney Todd Yeary, Reverend Attorney Todd Yeary.
First, let me say that I thought he did a terrific job yesterday. He's a great guy. I've been knowing him for a good little while. He's actually from Chicago. He's a brother of Prince Walker and Takia Walker, who used to be on Living Colors. And so I thought that he was legitimately irate and confused about what had happened. And I think you were right that there were some things that he wanted to say that he didn't say. But I think that he saw it in a very conspiratorial way, that for some reason that he was relieved of his duties in order to give these guys more time to do what they did. And he saw this really as a conspiracy from the top, because only people at the very top of the totem pole could make. He's a 2-star general. For anybody to tell him to stand down, they had to at least have more authority than him, and there's not a lot of folk with more authority than 2-star general. And so we have to start looking at what their motives was and why we would tell this guy to stand down, though how rare that is and how many times it has ever happened before, and why this crowd and why now.
Well, he was very careful. He was very deliberate in his language. And his languaging gave me cause to pause because he talked for quite a while. And he said a lot of things. He said the memo that restricted him was unlike anything he had seen in his career. He said the memo was unusual in that it required me to seek authorization from the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense to essentially even protect my guardsmen. His hands were tied, everybody. His hands were tied. And he went to Congress yesterday, just basically asking why. You are a veteran, Reverend Todd Yeary, Esquire, pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church, Senior Vice President of Rainbow Push. What did you see yesterday? What do you see and what do you anticipate today?
Well, good morning, Santita, and to Big Brother Dwight, Attorney Fancher, to your audience. Here's what I heard from the general. If you understand the military structure, it is a structure of accountability. We have a chain of command. And as I was listening to the testimony and recall that there were certain moves that were made in terms of appointments in key places toward the end of the administration, and there was a great deal of concern about President Trump putting in sycophants who really didn't have the capacity to hold the offices to which they had been appointed, but they were just basically placeholders to facilitate something, and we weren't quite sure. Now we know what it was. There are a couple of things that I heard from the general's testimony that raised concern, not only the issues within the Department of Defense and raising the issue of why D.C. needs statehood. It's a whole issue. If you want to kind of get to that grind, part of it is what we saw on January the 6th. The mayor is left on an iceberg that has already melted. You have a general whose authority has been taken by basically agents of a president who was so insecure that he would do anything to stay in office, even if it meant an insurrection against the government. The other part was the lack of coordination and information that was flowing. And I've not yet heard the Secretary of Homeland Security or the former Secretary of Homeland Security come in and testify as to the coordination amongst agencies. If you remember, after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was created because of the lack of coordination that many felt facilitated the horrors of 9/11. And so there's just enough manipulation here. And I think Big Brother Dwight just said it. He used the word conspiratorial. It is, and it will forever be, a conspiracy. We just don't know who all of the conspirators were. But I think the memo begins to kind of like breadcrumbs that will lead you wherever you need to go. The birds will follow. I think we're going to get enough breadcrumbs that eventually we're going to find the loaf.
Well, you got to know that, they're going after all of the low-hanging fruit, the people who stormed the Bastille, if you will. But they're not going after the people who denied the D.C. National Guard the opportunity to go protect the Capitol. You don't know why so many, 80% of the U.S. Capitol Police Force, 2,300 are there generally every day. Only 500 were there. So almost 80% were not there that day. There's a lot that's going on. And I think, Mark Fancher, we need to find out. How do you see all of this, Attorney Fancher?
No, I agree with what's been said. And I think that, it's rare that we get to see examples of integrity and courage. The soldier's discipline that we saw, without fear of consequences for him to tell the truth that he told. So we have to respect that. But at the same time, I'm wondering if on a broader level, as we look ahead at future threats that are posed, that we concern ourselves with something more than just military responses. That what I'm really convinced at this point that we're dealing with, a massive cult that won't be deterred by a use of force, but which in fact it might be like throwing gasoline on a fire for there to be a heavy state response to these things. And so I think the government, which is so adept at using psychological operations, really needs to get to work on figuring out how to engage in mass deprogramming of these people, because I think a good many of them who are still at this point even contemplating another attack are probably psychologically lost, absent some type of intervention. The other point I did want to throw in is I have to part company with our brother Malcolm Nance at the top of the show, where he made the argument that because our ancestors built these buildings that, we should have a special fondness for them. I also know that our ancestors built plantations, harvested many crops, built the big houses on those plantations, but they were the first ones who were prepared to burn them down. So I think we need to maintain a proper perspective on our relationship with this country and what our ancestors did under duress and that they were forced to do.
Do you think that's what we saw with the head of the D.C. National Guard yesterday? Because I think he just skated right on the edge, because you could see, Attorney Fancher, you could see a lot of tension. At least that's what I'm seeing. I think he was very, very careful about what he said. But when he said that this was very unusual, that he was mystified as to why he could not bring his people in to assist the other police officers. He said, I've never seen anything like this. What is going on here?
Yeah, I think it. I usually just look at the obvious. I mean, I think that there was a deliberate attempt to make the way clear for the people who were attacking the Capitol to have at it, and it's as simple as that.
Dwight, what would that have looked like? I mean, what were they trying to do on January 6th? And what are people afraid of today?
Well, they had handcuffs and a sign saying, "Where's Nancy?" You draw your own conclusions on that one.
Ooh. It's it's just hard to believe. That's hard to wrap your mind around, Reverend Yuri, Reverend Dr. Yuri. It's just, but I mean, the way the cameras were moving on January 6th, you couldn't. I just saw chaos. But it was when I saw the footage of these people wandering the halls, shouting for Nancy in a menacing way. Nancy Pelosi, hey Nancy, Nancy. Well, I mean, I said, whoa. And then when you see footage later on of them hustling the vice president of the United States out of the building because they were coming for him too. And it just seems like it crossed party lines, Reverend Dr. Yuri.
Well, I don't know about party lines. Ideologically, I think there was a thread. It was a singular thread. Insurrections are driven by chaos. So what fuels them is inspiration, not coordination. And it is the lack of coordination that makes them so dangerous because a response, when I was very young, learned crowd control and civil disturbance responses, member of the Georgia National Guard. One of the things that we recognized is that you tried to break down coordination, right? So what made this hard to control is that there was very little coordination, and then there was infiltration in the midst of it, where you had a very small cell that was operating with some level of the ability to communicate and know exactly what they were doing. And we still have not yet heard how they were able to get the information that allowed them to basically navigate the interior of the Capitol without a guide. So I think there's enough there, right? The ideology that drove this was not voter registration. I would even argue that if we were to get right down to it, as we've seen in many of these instances, a lot of these folks that have since been taken into custody weren't even registered voters. So whether they saw blue or red, what they saw that day was an opportunity to create chaos. And we saw residuals of this. Remember Charlottesville, what looked like an organized march with tiki torches, with folks walking around saying, Jews will not replace us, and some folks saying, you will not replace us, and folks walking around publicly with guns, menacing Black people. We have to remember that this fuel was stoked the entire 4 years. It was just waiting. Years ago, I kind of handled the munitions. My responsibility was in logistics. I was in the quartermaster corps. I ordered the bombs and the bullets, so to speak. So there's something called det cord and timing fuse. What we saw in Charlottesville was the lighting of timing fuse. What we saw on January 6th was the triggering of the det cord, the detonation that tripped the explosive that this had been brewing for 4 years. And it just took a little time to get the right pieces in place. And I think what the general shared yesterday was the outgrowth, because when you have someone who knows how to deploy power, have that authority lifted at the last minute to not even be able to protect his own soldiers, that's not only a problem, that's a crime.
Absolutely. But when I say it crosses party lines, this is no party. People float in between the parties. The plurality of Americans are independent anyway. There's something, I think, deeper going on here. And I think that we would be remiss if we did not address it. Because
I think we got to prove it first. I think what we found what I've seen from the arrest is these are these are unaffiliated ragtag folks that a president knew he could fuel to accomplish an end. So the ideology that is most threatening is what happens when someone rises to power, uses that power, manipulates it in such a way that they can stoke a violent response that does harm not only to the institutions, but to the fabric of what the country. People have died. That's a very horrific thing that I think. While the party politics are intriguing, the bigger danger is this reach beyond party politics.
But that's my point. This is not about party.
Yeah.
This is not about party. This is about people who are broke and who are broken. I have gone. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This is not even about President Trump anymore. The study, I'm not speculating. They have taken the data of the people who were there. And many of the people who were there are financially in trouble, as most Americans are. And we're sitting on a powder keg when you have this many people in America who are trying to figure out one meal, how they're going to get from one meal to the next, who are on the verge of bankruptcy, who are on the verge of eviction, who can't send their kids to college, who are afraid to send their children to public schools. I mean, look, we got a mess. That's all I'm saying. I think we're on the same page, Reverend. I'm just saying to me, this is not even, you just to the point. It's not about party. There's something else going on here. And I think we, when we get back in 1 minute,
in both of you all's position.
In 1 minute, Dwight, because I got to go to break. We will be right back on the Santita Jackson Show. No, Dwight, hold on. I got to go to break. But we will be right back, and I want you to write that down. I want you to make your point when you get back. I want you to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let's talk about this. What do you see? What do you see? Let me know what you see and what we're looking at today in America. This is an opportunity for us to really get things right. Get things right. I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT 820 AM 950 Radio. Back in just a few minutes. Thank you, guys. I'm coordinating with a couple of other stations, so I have to get out at a particular time, and so I need the time. I need the space to gracefully get out, okay? Because it helps me when I identify the station when I'm about to go. But Dwight, do you want to make your point on the air, or do you want to make it here and then make it on the air again?
I'll make it back and then I'll make it on there real quickly.
Okay, go on.
I think both of you all are correct. I think that inherent in it is also a people whose very identity is rooted in white privilege. And so they don't know anybody else to be. And so they are desperate to hold on to that because their whole self-concept, their whole self-image is rooted in white privilege. And to have that threatened is for them to have their very existence and their very worth threatened. And I think that's the underlying dynamic in it all. There's an economic desperation. But I think that even the economic desperation is rooted in the fact of, yeah, but I'm white and I shouldn't be going through this. I understand that, Spanish going through it, Negroes should be going through it, but I'm a white person. Why would I be going through this?
Because I work hard.
I think that's the...
I do everything the right way. I'm not like them. I don't get arrested. Yeah, because the police choose not to arrest you. I'm doing everything right. No. And so all this big joke on privilege is now coming home to roost, I think. So, and so definitely make that point. But we have we have a couple of minutes. So you all talk amongst yourselves because we're on Facebook Live right now and everybody is weighing in. Everybody, please like and share. Hey, Leslie, how you doing? Bab? You and Carol on the left coast. I want you to please call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Have this tremendous panel. Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. It's one of the iconic churches in the United States. And of course, he's vice president of Rainbow Push and one of the founding members of Operation Push. And part of the National Action Network now and still part of the Rainbow. We never leave is Dwight McKee, of course, affectionately known and actually known as Dr. D. And of course, Attorney Mark Fancher, the brilliant Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers. We're going to have Kevin Gray join us. Kevin Gray is with us right now. Kevin, of course, is a veteran just like you. Reverend Dr. Urey. And he is also the manager, really the architect of Reverend Jackson's 84 and 88 historic South Carolina presidential campaigns, where he won in a squeaker in 84 and convincingly, absolutely, in 1988. And he's the author of the book, among others, Killing Trayvons, an anthology of American violence. How you doing, Kevin, before we come on up? And of course, wait a minute.
I'm doing good.
Railroad Barbecue in Columbia, South Carolina. Let me not forget that. Everybody, you got to go down there. We did have a great time down there. It's just, can you believe it? Was it a year ago?
1 minute.
Was a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Wow.
February last year.
Yeah, February last year. Wow. Wow. We
Right before we had to shut down.
Yeah. Well, we were getting prepared for that then, remember?
Yep.
We said we knew that we were going to have to shut down. We had that feeling. So, but thank you. And of course, you're on with Mark Fancher, attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers. You know Reverend Dr. Yeary from
30.
Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. And of course, Rainbow Push. And of course, Dwight McKee from Rainbow Push and from the National Action Network. So stand by.
15. 10. 5.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Police have uncovered a possible plot by militia to breach the Capitol. I'm Santita Jackson. This is WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Want you to call me or text me. Thank you, GWC Injury Lawyers, for the opportunity to text. Text 773-763-WCPT. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We're talking about what we heard yesterday as the head of the D.C. National Guard talked about the unusual events of January 16th, January 6th, where his hands were tied, when they could not go in and stop the insurrection at the Capitol. They were just prevented from doing it by the Pentagon. I mean, this goes up really, really high. So what is going on here? We've been talking with Dwight McKee and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire, and, of course, you, Attorney Mark Fancher. Dwight, you want to make your point before we bring on Kevin Gray?
Yeah, very quickly, I was simply saying that I think both of you all have a valid point. But I think the subtext to that point is that the sense of white privilege, that these white people are insulted, that how can I be white and be broke? And that white privilege, that their very identity is rooted in white privilege. And so they are really in existential crisis because their definition of being white and in charge is at risk. And so you see them trying to cope with that by any means necessary.
So, Kevin, what do you make of all of this? And what do you make of what is anticipated today? They've completely shut Capitol Hill down.
I'm not so concerned that what happened on January 6th is going to happen today. The way that the Capitol's on lockdown, what I worry about is the Capitol being on extended lockdown and having more military being involved in guarding capitals or guarding public buildings against protest, or taking an active role in suppressing protest. I mean, I'm not on the side of Donald Trump in any respect, or any of the folk who are supporting white supremacy and white nationalism, or they're fighting over their loss of perceived power. We know the corporations and elite capitalism is really in control. I worry about the fact that we have the two political parties, or we have the so-called left and right, that when one group is in power, they fight to suppress the voices of the other group, and that becomes a problem for all of us. I really worry about the attack on civil liberties moving forward, and who that ends up hurting the most moving forward. When you limit speech, you limit the speech of the most powerless. And still in America, the people who have the weakest voice as relates to government and power are people of color. And so that is my concern. It's not necessarily that a group of people think that they're going to storm the Capitol with guns and somehow overthrow the government and insert Donald Trump in the presidency. I don't think that's going to happen. But as I said, I do worry about the erosion of rights during this whole process.
Well, to your point, is it unsettling to see the Capitol completely surrounded with a fence?
Well, I remember when you could drive. I remember when you could drive in front of the White House, and now you can't get to that. And so and part of that was 9/11 and the National Defense Authorization Act and the Patriot Act, which supposedly progressives are against. No question, the Capitol and public buildings ought to be protected. But this idea that all of a sudden it's going to be walled America, a fence around the state, the Capitol, a fence around the White House, a fence around anything, well, that ought to give people concern.
So do you think we are sufficiently concerned about that?
No. And as I said, when look, the white folk were going to these state capitals wearing their guns way before they stormed the Capitol. And now in South Carolina, they're debating an open carry bill. The gun rights movement marches on. White folk are buying guns and passing laws to protect their ownership of guns and having stockpiles. And we still haven't dealt with that. I mean, we haven't dealt with that since the Trayvon Martin shooting, and we were talking about fighting, stand your ground. I always talk about organizing and figuring out what you're organizing against or what you're organizing for. It seems that we always are just organizing as reactionaries to what the other side does instead of being proactive in some of this stuff.
Well, I mean, Mark Fancher, what do you say about that? Because beyond January 6th, now we're in March, and beyond 9/11, we still haven't gotten our rights back. And it seems like we're losing more and more rights every day underneath all of this activity.
Yeah, I think there's a more immediate concern even than that. As usual, I think Dwight McKee nailed it in terms of analyzing what's happening with, these white workers who, are just totally frustrated because the promise that has been made to them over a long period of time about the fact that their white privilege, their status as white people would always ensure their financial and political and social security, they just don't know what to do. This is totally confusing to them, and they have become vulnerable to the efforts of a demagogue to take them down a rabbit hole that leads to hell. And it's a vast political void that is not new. It's been there for a long time. I mean, these people have been left without any type of an accurate analysis of their circumstances for generations. And, in terms of proactive organizing, all of these particularly progressive white forces in this country that stand back and look at all of this in horror need to get busy. I think particularly the Black community for a long time has been telling white progressives, white radicals and others that their task, their responsibility is to go into these white working communities and to explain to them, to give them an accurate analysis of why their lives have been so turned upside down. And until somebody goes in and explains to them, those who are not lost to the cult, explains to them that it's the capitalists, the major corporations that are responsible for their misery, then they will remain subject to these influences that cause them to strike out in frustration and confusion. I mean, so many of them are lost. And, as I said earlier, I think short term, some of them are so lost that they do need some type of psychological intervention to, pull them from the grip that the Trump phenomenon seems to have on them.
It certainly has enhanced everything. Let me go to Daniel. Daniel, what's on your mind today?
Hi.
Hi,
Thanks
Daniel.
for taking the call. How are you?
How are you?
Good. I'm enjoying the conversation, and I listen pretty regularly.
Thank you.
But this conversation, I guess they're having the hearings on the goings on January 6th and around the Capitol and that kind of thing. And trying to get to the bottom of things. What really astonishes me is that President Trump, at the time, I mean, people are trying to make the connection the same way the representatives or the House managers tried to make this First Amendment argument to impeach the president. And it's the vagaries of language and all that kind of thing. First Amendment issues are foggy at best. And it just astonished me that nobody, I've heard, I think maybe one mention of it in the press and on radio or TV, wherever, nobody has mentioned, and the House managers did not go after Trump watching the break-in at our Capitol, watching it on TV. Our president watching the invasion of our Capitol building, watching it on TV.
The president. Malcolm said
the president.
They were talking. Yeah, they were. Yeah, Malcolm X once famously said when he was talking about the government.
Hold on, Kevin. What were you saying, Daniel?
The commander-in-chief sworn to uphold and defend our institutions and the Constitution, watching for I don't know how much time, an hour, 2 hours, watching on television while his vice president, while the Congress are being, in the Capitol are being overrun, lives are in danger, and ignoring phone calls for intervention, not instantly scrambling helicopters, the National Guard. This is a sin of omission. This is an abdication of duty as President of the United States. Nobody says anything like, I watched our country violated on television. As president, I watched it. And truth be told, he cheered it or reveled in it. So I just don't get why nobody says this is not the vagaries of a First Amendment, go fight. What does fight mean? Does it mean violent? Does it mean oppose a position? Those are foggy kinds of things to prove. And he was very careful the way he danced around the language. On the other hand, this is undeniable what happened. What he failed to do as president is undeniable.
What do you want to see happen, Daniel?
Well, first of all, I'd like to see these investigations that are taking place now. I mean, yeah, you can focus on the poor, and I mean, the poor, misguided and desperate people like you're talking about. This is a class. It's always been about class. It's not about race. It's about money and poor people and people scrambling for crumbs on the table.
Well, Daniel,
that's what it's about.
Well, Daniel, I'll tell you can never, and I think that's one of the mistakes that white progressives make, taking caste out of this discussion. Be very, very clear. Race is central to this American project because racism was injected when you separated white indentured servants and you racialized slavery. Race got put in it, and it's at the heart of this thing. It is.
Well, you're right. I shouldn't generalize in that way.
No. But I understand what you're saying. I think that there's a way that I'm hearing you, but I'm just saying the only way Americans are going to get well is if we continue to, if we have got to begin to understand racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous people racism. Because that was the piece that Elizabeth Warren missed. I mean, she didn't quite get it. And because when I see Bernie and Elizabeth, I'm like, boy, they are great. But you gotta grab a hold of this caste piece, not just a class piece.
Right.
You gotta.
Right.
So I'm feeling you.
Okay, you were asking what should happen. What I'd like to see happen is these representatives say, okay, yeah, these people committed crimes. These 300 or 400 or 500 people that they're rounding up or that they let walk away and then subsequently we've had to round up. Yeah, they committed crimes and there should be justice meted out for them.
No matter
On
how
the
high
other
it goes.
hand,
No matter how high it goes, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think it goes high.
I don't hear anybody. Why is there not anybody saying exactly what I just said? Why aren't these representatives saying, you know, the real crime or the big crime or the unbelievable crime is that our president watched this go down on TV and did nothing.
Well, you know,
I mean, these poor people that flew in, these poor misguided saps that flew in to do his bidding. Yeah, okay, that's wrong and that's sad or whatever you want to say, or that's a crime. Yeah, but what about? Why aren't we looking at the top and the capital crime here? No pun intended.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Daniel, I hear you, but you know, sometimes getting the big guy or the big gal, if you will, that's always something we're reluctant to go after the big fish, right? I'm sending you much love, Daniel, because no, you do, you know, you very, we do not generally go after the big ones. We don't. But you know, Daniel, I have another Daniel from Chicago. I'm bringing on Daniel from Manchester, New Hampshire. Thank you. Sending you much love, Daniel from Chicago. Daniel from Manchester, bringing you on with much love. How are you?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for calling in today.
All right. So I wanted to respond to the gentleman, and I'm not entirely disagreeing. I'm just wanting to let you know from a white progressive perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently living in New Hampshire, but I'm from the Carolinas. I don't know if you can tell by my twang.
Where? Which Carolina?
I was a firefighter.
Okay.
Well, so I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. I went to college in Asheville, North Carolina, and that leads me to my story.
Okay.
I was a firefighter. Asheville, Buncombe County is pretty relatively blue, surrounded by a deep sea of disgusting red. I was a firefighter. The fire department tends to be incredibly red, or at least the more guys you get together, the more red they pretend to be. So, 2016, I was a firefighter in Western North Carolina. I got kicked into the hornet's nest my first day at the main station. We shared a department, or we shared a station with another department and the police department. So it was quite literally me against 18 firefighters and however many police officers were there. And it was a daily ritual to kick the Bernie supporter. You know, we'd start me off on political conversations, which I willingly participated in. But the issue arose when, what was his name? Comey, the FBI director, did the press conference right before the election about Hillary Clinton was guilty of everything. My chief brought me in to like the main hall, called everybody into the main hall and say, hey, we got your girl. Like he put that over the loudspeaker, you know, Amick, come out to the hall. You need to see this. And, you know, it was what it was. We had this lively discussion. You know, I stood my ground. They stood theirs. It got a little bit heated to where I was pulled into the captain's office and he said, and now keep in mind, the chief told me to come here. Started, we'll call it a debate. Started the debate, and then when I gave my political opinion, I was singled out and told, my opinion is not warranted. It is not valued. Do not air it. And for the next essentially 3 years of my career as a firefighter, I was the black sheep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
So the gentleman was absolutely correct. There are a whole bunch of lost people. And I don't remember who said it. I think one of the best things you can do is ask everybody, if you're going to get into a political debate, ask everybody, where was Obama born? If they say anything outside of the U.S., let him go.
Do you hear a lot of that? Do a lot of people feel that he's not born in the United States?
If you go down south, Obama is going to, until they die, Obama will be a Kenyan Muslim in the South. and you're not going to change that. There's nothing you can do to change that. And sadly, the truth of the matter is, you're probably going to do more harm than good by trying. So the best you can do is let that conversation go and move on to somebody that maybe you can change. Now, when I was in the fire department, and if I was, ever in the kitchen by myself and somebody came in, I could have a conversation with a guy, and he would have similar opinions. But if you get 18 guys together in a place that's that deep red, they cannot get away from the pack.
But Daniel, help me with that, because that's how we get lynch mobs, right?
Absolutely.
One on one, we're all right. But then when one or two or more are gathered in another name, oh my goodness, I got a problem. Why? What can you do to stand up? Because see, as a Black person, I am exhausted. I'm with Pam. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I can't resolve white racism. That's not my issue. I mean, it's my issue, but it's not my issue, because I can't. That's an argument I can't make to white people. You got to make it. There's some healing. Everybody talks about the healing that needs to happen in the Black community. There's healing, revealing, and healing that has to happen in the white community. What can you do to make that happen?
That is a very tough question, because in my experience and what I've seen, the best we can ever hope for is talking to their kids, because you ain't getting through to them. You are not getting through to them,
Well,
and that's why.
What can you do with their kids? I mean, what can you do with this generation, this new generation? What
Santita?
conversations are you? Yes, Mark, please.
Yeah, no, I think that, I so appreciate this gentleman speaking, because he's speaking absolute truth. And, I think that there are a couple of things that concerned people like him can and should do. One is he made a very, astute observation that you get 18 of them together, they're not going to listen to you. You get one of them off by themselves, maybe they will. We'll just go after one at a time. But the other thing that I think that, people really would benefit from is understanding the history and the context of their white existence. The fact that from the very beginning, this country was never structured in such a way that it was intended to address the needs and the interests of working class white people. It never was. It was always for elites, and they have abused and exploited and used working class white people, not only against their own interests, but against the interests of other people who are oppressed. And I think the more information that people have about that, the more that they can sit down one-on-one and explain in a rational way the historical context of where we are now and why their circumstances are as they are, the more the wheels will start to turn heads. They may not respond immediately, but you can't erase the truth from a person's consciousness. Once they get it, and it will manifest in some way or another down the road, even if their rhetoric suggests otherwise. So I think understanding the history, understanding the way that this country is structured, and then sharing that information with people one-on-one, it's the only hope that we have, I think, of trying to reverse a process that's been in progress over the course of generations.
So many of them. And I know you've got to run, Attorney Mark Fancher, but I want to thank you for always availing yourself to us. And see, because I want you to come back. I don't want you to say,
you know where to find me.
This girl holds me over. I told her I had to leave 55 after the hour. So blessings to you. I'm going to get closing thoughts from my panel. Daniel, you still there?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Stay right there, because I'm going to get
Daniel, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I'm actually from the upstate Spartanburg, and I went to graduate school in Western North Carolina at Western Carolina University. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I've got 2 minutes.
I went to Marshall College.
Oh, well, you're homies. Yeah, I've got 2 minutes. Kevin, why don't you respond to Daniel?
And Daniel, I mean, divide and conquer is not a new concept. That's the way the system has been set up to set people apart and have them fighting amongst one another. I kind of do it the way you do it. I try to catch people one-on-one and try to find common ground with that person in some way. It could be our Southerners. It could be, I got a barbecue place, and you got all kinds that come through the barbecue restaurant. The rednecks love barbecue, and they come to my place and they want to have a political conversation, which I'll engage them in. So you really, like you said, if you want to get together and have an argument with the Klan, then you're not gonna get anywhere. But the other thing is, throughout our history, throughout the history of the modern Republican Party, going back to the Democratic Party, back to the Civil War, this has always been about how to protect this idea of whiteness, the concept you might not have a dime, but you have your whiteness, and your whiteness gives you some power over these other people. That's been the policy and programmatic function of the modern Republican Party since the Dixiecrats became Republicans and the Southern strategy took effect.
So, well, I think,
Agreed.
Daniel, you got 30 seconds to respond.
I have
1 minute.
really nothing to add. Everybody, they seem to understand the experience, and I get trying to single people out. My problem, it probably comes from a place of privilege, is regardless of where I am, I'm a relatively opinionated person. So if you want to talk politics, I'm okay with the odds of one against 18. So I take them as they come.
Well, you know what? Let me tell you something. I thank you for listening and for calling in, because this is how we begin to break ground and make progress, Daniel. When we have honest, forthright, mature conversations with each other, and when we're open to each other. And so, my dear brother Daniel,
15.
I know you're not getting great barbecue up in Manchester, but that's all right. You gotta connect
10.
with Kevin, so you get that railroad barbecue.
5.
After this pandemic, I'm gonna look it up.
I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. God bless you. Love you much.
Y'all have a good one.
Daniel, thank you so much. Does anyone want to say anything to Facebook Live before we go? Reverend Dr. Yeary?
A couple of things that Kevin raised. We're making the purchase of guns easier in many states, making it harder to vote. Interesting dichotomy of values. There's an underlying angst that is being stoked, and the data is very complicated, to Dwight's point, about who's stoking. Folks who can fly in for an insurrection ain't as broke as we think. So there is a fueling of the insecurities of the masses to accomplish an end that often works against their interests. That's how insurrections are actually started. You get folks to kind of follow somewhat blindly. And I think what we have to pay attention to is that we message to the human condition. Poverty is a condition. It's not a party affiliation. It affects everybody, rural and urban, suburban, and the like. And as we kind of work through these early days of this new administration and we push back, states are coming at voting rights in ways that we haven't seen in decades. Just like we have the oral arguments on a case that's going after Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act now. So I think there are things that we have to make sure that we stay focused while we also remain prepared and vigilant. And as we do it, every now and then when you sit down at a table with a good plate of barbecue in front of you, then you can have conversations about divergent ideas. But in the meantime, we got to stay up on the wall because there are folks who are trying to knock that wall down.
Amen to that. Dwight McKee?
I think, good morning, Yuri. I think we have to have a reorientation of values. Is that Jesus said you have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And ultimately, you have to be born again. I think that we have to have a complete reorientation of what we put value on and what we live for. Is that unless we see God as a father and understand the brotherhood of man, and we're all brothers and made in the image of God, that we will always have this distortion of values and self-image and superiority. We all have to, I think we have to be born again.
Is that what attracted you to Dr. King? That message?
Yeah, his message was a message of not just economic equity. He had a message of a beloved community. He talked about the spirit of Christ and the spirit of justice, not just who was going to be in charge. Yeah, that's actually absolutely what attracted me to Dr. King. Same thing attracted me to Jesus.
Well, you know it, and my mother did say, Kevin Gray, after having worked for and with Dr. King, she really believed in Jesus. She said, because the mission statement, Reverend Dr. Urey, of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference is to save the soul of America. It's not desegregate America, integrate America. It's none of that. It's to save the soul of America. And these were ministers who sought to save the soul of America. And even Dr. King, according to Harry Belafonte and others who I know who know him, my parents included, said, he mused just before he was murdered. I fear America is a house on fire, and I fear I'm integrating my people into a house that is on fire. Not that desegregation was not the right fight, it has been. But he talked about completely realigning our values, Kevin. Just said, this military industrial complex, our thinking on all of this, on racism, on militarism, on poverty, on our economy, everything is off, Kevin. Your closing thought, Kevin? Or did Kevin already go? Well, Kevin has a barbecue restaurant to open up. And so I want to thank you all. Does anyone have anything else they want to say before we go? Reverend Dr. Urey?
Santita, I think maybe at some point we need to have a deeper conversation about what whiteness is and what whiteness ain't. We assume it is about complexion, but all white folk ain't white when we consider the inequality that exists. And so if there were a deeper understanding, I think you would see different alliances that come together to fight back against the structural inequality that affects the human condition and not get caught up in the specter of race. I think that's what Dr. King's impact was, is he called out racism, but he spoke to the effects of the universal human condition, which gets you to beloved community. It's not a beloved segment of the community. It is making sure that the decency and the dignity of people is protected and affirmed. And whenever it is under siege, we have a moral obligation to push back using the tools and the implements of peace, not violence, because violence only begets more violence.
Well, amen to that, because indeed that is what we saw. That is what we saw at coming through Operation Breadbasket and Operation Push and Rainbow Push. And Dwight's been there through just about all of it. Because even I guess when my father went to Selma, he went with he organized his two best friends who were his white classmates. My uncle Gary Masoni, as you knew Gary Masoni. He's gone on to be with the Lord, and David Wallace. And he hired 3 people after Dr. King hired him, 2 white, 1 black. And we do have to have it. We have to continue to have a discussion on what whiteness is, what it really is, what it is not, and what our responsibilities are too as Black people. My mother has often said that if God wanted us to be on top of that Mayflower, that's where God would have put us. That's not where we were supposed to be. There's some responsibilities that we have too, and we have to live up to them. We've all got a lot of work to do. We all have a lot of work to do in order to create a more perfect union and ultimately the beloved community. Dwight, do you want to say anything before we go?
No. Good day, Mark and Yuri. Always good to talk to you all.
I love you all so much. And I
You
love
as well.
everybody. Love you. Reverend Dr. Yeri. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ooh. And
Thank you. Love you back.
I love you, love you, love you. And I will see you all tomorrow morning, bright and early, on the Santita Jackson Show. Like and share. Love you all, everybody. God bless. Thank you, Chaparro. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Marnie.